The Archangel Chronicles by Raymond. Copyright 2021. All rights reserved. Chapter 3. Abu and the Dragon. After leaving the prefecture, I walked back through the main gate of the castrum and sought out the centurion. I gave him a handful of sesterces for his troubles, and told him that the fish in the sack on my back was bound for the prefect in Alexandria. I thanked him again for his good humor. I asked him for a recommendation about where I could find food and accommodation. He cheerfully directed me to an inn called Felix's Capone, down near the harbor. The streets were crowded with merchants and stalls and awnings of every color showcasing goods and wares for sale. I took it all in my walk down to the harbor. I looked at the textiles, squeezed the fruit, and stopped to listen to the salesmen hawking their wares. I reveled in this experience, being newly freed from a solitary confinement. I craved the company of humanity, even though these people were so vastly different from me and had no idea how far, both in time and space, I had come to be with them. I came at last to Felix's Capone and stood in front. Colorful signs and pictures with Greek and Latin characters announced to the world that this was Aswan's finest inn, replete with hot food, private rooms, and the best wine in southern Egyptus. It struck me, having come across 2,000 years and half a world to be here, that advertising was an ancient art and exaggeration was not a modern invention. Around the rear of the Capone there was a stable. It was empty of any animals at the time. In one of the stalls, I again saw that same copper-skinned boy, about 10 years old, dressed in an oversized, tattered, ill-fitting tunic, sleeves rolled back to reveal skinny arms, and knobby legs sticking out below the hem of a tattered tunic. He was lanky and athletic, with intelligent dark liquid eyes beneath thick eyebrows, a smooth-skinned, dirty face, with a snub nose and a head topped with a thick mop of black hair. His haircut was atrocious, with a soup bowl cut and shaven sides. He was mucking out one of the stalls and shoveling the spoiled straw and manure into a battered cart with large wooden wheels. "You there, boy," I said, dropping my burden to the dirt floor. The fish within the sack thrashed about mildly for a couple of seconds, but then stopped. The boy looked up sharply, brows furrowed, and then his face brightened into a big smile, revealing strong white teeth. "You," he exclaimed in Greek, "the magician with that huge ugly fish. What fun with that centurion! I laughed so hard, my stomach hurt." He threw down the rake in his hand and approached me, examining me up and down carefully, eyes darting, taking in all of the details. He was entirely fearless, confident, and unimpressed being in the presence of an adult. I felt like a horse being carefully appraised by a trader. His eyes came to rest on the bulging purse hanging from my belt. "How can I help you, Kyrios?" he said slyly, looking for a business opportunity. "What is your name, boy?" I asked. "Abu Bakr," he replied. "Abu Bakr. I shall call you Abu. Where do you live?" "Here, Kyrios." "Here in the Capone?" I asked. "No, I live here in the stable." "Where are your mother and father?" "They are no longer in this world, Kyrios. My father made the trip to the Duat, the underworld, before I came into this world. My mother made the trip to the judgment of the dead when I was born. She was judged by Osiris and rests in the fields of reeds, the Sekhet Aru. My uncle sold me. He had many mouths of his own to feed. I belong to Draco now. He makes me work here." The metal around my neck was vibrating gently. I could see a warm glow, a faint light, an aura, encompassing this boy. "Does Draco own this stable?" I asked, looking around. "Yes, but he's not here. He is in the Capone, getting drunk and hatching schemes." He spat on the dirt floor. "I must talk to your master Draco." "Does he own the Capone?" "No, he stays there waiting for business opportunities." "Then I must see him, for I have a business opportunity for him." Abu Bakr, who up to this point had been remarkably forthcoming, looked down. A darkness came over his face, and he whispered, "Kyrios, do not trust that man. He is, he said softly, moving very close to me, "a snake. May the gods curse his name, and the harpies pluck out his eyes," he said, voice wavering. "Then I must trust you. I come from a long way and desire food and lodging for the night, and I must take care that this fish stays alive until I can get him downriver," I said. His face brightened with a winning smile. "I will help you. For a fee, of course, but this is just between you and me. If Draco found out, he would fly into a rage and beat me. He would devour me." "Devour you? What an expression," I said, putting my hand on his shoulder. "Will he devour you like a dragon? Is that why he is called Draco?" Abu nodded, those big liquid eyes looking at me intently. "Well now, I think I might know how to deal with dragons," I said. "After all, that monster in the sack is almost like a dragon, and here he is." Abu giggled. "What will you do with the money I give you?" I asked. "I have a secret place where I keep it, Kyrios. I have almost enough now to buy my freedom," he said evenly. "Well then, we shall help each other. You will help me find some water for this infernal beast, and I will help you with some sesterci for your freedom fund. What do you say?" "Agreed," he said, coming over and confidently bowing. "Abu, at your service." "Abu, I think it is best that you keep the presence of my pet dragon here a secret. He's really quite valuable in the right hands. Let's just call him my little treasure," I said. "Of course, Kyrios." Abu nodded. I reached into my purse and pulled out a few coins. Abu's eyes followed my gesture intently, and I noticed how he looked hungrily at the rest of the coins in my purse. I made a mental note to keep my eye on this remarkable boy. I had the impression that he was an adept pickpocket with those skinny arms and long hands, with sleeves pulled up, ready for action. We found an empty horse-watering trough in a corner of the stable and pulled it into the shadows. Abu ran away with a bucket, and after a few trips back and forth to the river, the trough was full. I unwrapped the slippery fish, grabbing it under the chin by the gill covers, and manhandled it into the water. Strangely enough, the great fish was quite content to stay in the trough, the water just covering the great gleaming back. We covered it with an old canvas sail, and then covered the lot with a pile of straw. This done, I took Abu aside and gave him a few more coins and told him to watch the fish and make sure no one came in. "My lips are sealed for eternity, Kyrios," he said, holding out his hand for a few more coins, with a big, charming smile. I went round to the front of the Caponie and entered from the street. Inside there was a counter, a thermopolia, filled with steaming terracotta crocks recessed into a counter, offering hot mulled wine, lentils, meats, stewing and gravy. On the top of the counter displayed large wheels of cheeses, together with olives, lemons, berries, and nuts. A rack of amphorae holding various kinds of wines, neatly labeled, was displayed behind the counter. A group of 5 men sat at a long table, playing dice. Another 4 or 5 stood around the table, staring intently at the game being played before them. The click of coins being tossed into the table preceded the sound of the dice being shaken in a wooden cup, followed by the chattering of the dice as they hit the table, and then expressions of delight or curses from the various participants. Another group of several men, dressed in long hooded capote cloaks, sat around a tripod table with a jug of wine, whispering with each other as I entered. They all turned their faces toward me, stopping their furtive discussions abruptly as I proceeded to the counter. I could feel their eyes on me as I stood there. I noticed that one of this group, a man of small stature, hunched back and very ugly and sickly looking, with very pale skin, a black scraggly beard, balding head, angular bony, looked at me intently with his small beady eyes. I returned the gaze, and he quickly looked back to his companions and resumed the whispering conversation, glancing my way from time to time. I guessed that this must be Draco. The Chi-Rho medal on my chest began tingling as if it were generating a mild electric shock. I noticed a shadow lurking behind that ugly-looking guy. As I watched this shadow, so dark that it seemed to absorb all light, it seemed to ooze out of the man and flow into a sort of a pool on the floor behind where he was sitting. This disturbed me. Out of the corner of my eye, I watched, trying not to be conspicuous in staring at it. This black shadow flowed away from the background in little black rivulets until it was gone. It sent a shiver down my back. What was it I just saw? I began to doubt myself. Did I see anything? Internally, I shrugged it off and chalked the experience up to the fact that I was getting very hungry and very tired. A woman with plucked eyebrows and heavily made-up eyes, thick, straight black hair framing a smooth, bronze-colored face, stood behind the counter. I thought to myself that she was right out of central casting and could have been a Cleopatra model. I had the distinct impression that there were many services for sale here, but I only asked for a simple hot meal and some of that nice mulled wine. The girl escorted me to an elegant inner chamber, which was equipped with reclining couches. The walls were decorated with colorful frescoes showing various pastoral scenes. It had been a long and eventful day. Being hungry and tired, I took a couch, accepted the wine and food when it came, and ate. I nodded off several times. After being refreshed, I made arrangements with the girl for a private room overlooking the water. It was simple but clean, and the shutters were thrown open, revealing, as if in a framed picture, the beautiful vista of the river and its eastern bank on the far side. A crescent moon was rising over the brow of the purple hills. The waters rippled gently in the soft night breeze, flashing quicksilver when waves reflected the pale moonlight. It was a peaceful and gorgeous view, quite a change from what I could see from when I first began this day. If this was a dream, it was indeed a good one. Looking over this peaceful scene, I pondered on the day's events, sitting on the edge of my bed. It was all so unreal. It was impossible, and yet here I was. This was no dream. Somehow I had been snatched from a hopeless imprisonment and brought to this time and place by forces beyond my comprehension. I had been forced to engage my wits, to follow completely uncertain paths, and experience things which were way beyond my imagination. I found it challenging, but I had accepted the challenge and all its uncertainties. Although I was dead tired, I felt a sense of exhilaration. I felt so alive. I lay down on the simple cot and drifted into a dreamless sleep. I woke up as the first rays of the rising sun broke above the desert hills on the opposite side of the river. The sunlight warmed my face and roused me from my deep sleep. I got up and dressed, looking out my open window on the river, and I saw that the outer world was stirring awake. Already those iconic lateen-sailed feluccas were slipping away from their berths on the river. Some of them were turning downriver, sails furled, their crews rowing into the middle of the river, where they picked up the current and headed north towards Luxor, the ancient capital of the New Kingdom, Thebes, and further down to Memphis, the capital of the Old Kingdom, and then eventually to Alexandria, one of the great Greek cities of the ancient world. In the distance, a flotilla of feluccas, white sails unfurled, could be seen sailing south towards the town, their billowing sails catching the prevailing north wind sweeping up the great river. It was time to get going. I had to make plans, and I felt I needed to get to the great city of Alexandria, where my fate lay. I went to the market and bought some food and a skin of wine from the shop downstairs, and went back to the stable to search for Abu. Rounding the corner, I could hear a commotion coming out of the stable. I crept round the corner in time to see Draco holding Abu by the throat against the back wall, cursing and swearing. The Chi-Rho metal on my chest began to tingle and then vibrate. That same black shadow was now looming up behind Draco. Draco was in the act of pulling out a curved dagger from his belt. He was in a rage. He began to yell, spittle punctuating each word between curses. "Thought you were pulling a fast one on us, ye motherless scum. Keeping that treasure all for yourself, were ye? Cheat on Draco, think ye? Well, now ye knows the price for that. I'll take an ear from ye, I will." He spat as he raised the knife to Abu's face. Abu could see past Draco and saw me standing behind him. Abu's eyes were as wide as saucers, and his face was filled with fear and pleading. I was on to Draco in 3 strides and grabbed him roughly by the neck and seized the wrist of his knife hand. I twisted it and brought it back behind his shoulder blades. "Drop it," I commanded. Draco squealed in surprise and tried to turn on me, but he dropped the knife. I was shocked at how strong he actually was, but had a good grip on his wrist, twisting it up further up his back. I swept my foot and knocked Draco off balance. He fell awkwardly onto the dirt floor, his face in the straw and mud. Now the Chi-Rho metal on my chest was pulsing, throwing off heat. That strange black shadow reared up behind Draco. Suddenly, like liquid tar, it collapsed and formed a black pool on the floor, which flowed away back into the corners in rivulets no longer visible. I let Draco go, and he jumped to his feet with surprising swiftness. He was looking for his knife. It was nowhere to be found. I had noticed Abu had picked it up during the struggle and tucked it into his tunic. Draco swayed back and forth, beady eyes now on my face. A look of recognition passed over his twisted, ugly face, and he relaxed. He looked me up and down. "Kyrios, Kyrios, have mercy on this poor man," he said in a sickly, sweet voice. "By the gods, I meant no harm," he said, catching his breath. "I am doing ye a favor, I say. This dog here is my slave. He's a pickpocket, I tell ye. He has your money, he does. He forgets his place, he does. Give it back, I says. And I was going to teach him a lesson before he stopped me. This dog needs correcting, doesn't he? It's for your own good, says I." I said firmly, "He took nothing from me. What I gave him, I gave freely. He helped me. I paid him. Now let him go." I called Abu over and looked at his throat. Although it was red where Draco had grabbed him, he seemed okay. I turned back to Draco. "Draco, is that your name?" I asked. Aye, Kyrios, at your service. What can we do for the nice master?" "Draco, where I come from, we do not treat children, slave or not, like that. Take care you do not harm this child, or I will see to it that harm is returned to you fourfold." Draco's beady, sunken eyes narrowed a bit. "Now, if you are of service to me, we will forget this little incident. The first thing is, what is your price for this boy's freedom?" A sneering smile slipped across Draco's face. He rubbed his scraggly beard and thought for a moment. Then, coming closer to me, he said in a plaintive voice, "Well, you see here, Kyrios, I don't greatly know if I could part with this lad. He's me security in me old age, so's to speak. No, we don't rightly think we could do without him. He keeps this poor old man going, so's to speak. And so, after all, I took him in when he was all alone. There was many a gold coin paid to feed and clothe him, you know." "Yes, I can see he was well cared for all these years," I said sarcastically. "You have done a fine job, so here's the deal. Find me a boat to hire to take me up the river to Alexandria. Give me the boy, and there's 2 gold aureas in it for all your trouble." Draco looked down and scratched his head, and then said, "Well now, a boat? Yeah, I know just the fellow. Taking a load of grain. I could ask him if he'd do it, but that will cost us 10 denarii. "Right, and I'm sure you'll pay him well if you gave him half of that," I said. "But me boy here," Draco said, "it will break me heart to see him off. He's a comfort to me in me old age, and I just ain't sure what your intentions are with him. Maybe you're up to no good yourself." "Draco, my friend," I cut in, "I am impressed with your unselfish concern for the boy's welfare. Would another gold aurea salve your conscience?" Draco rubbed his chin. "Well now, it might. But you knows we had to feed and clothe him since we took him in." "Fine," I said. "Let me assuage your conscience and give recompense for all your tender loving care these past years," I said, lifting my right hand, displaying 4 gold aureas in the palm. Draco looked intently at this like a vulture, carefully calculating how far he could take the dickering. "Well now," he said, stretching out his hand to take the gold. "Deal then." "Not so fast, Draco," I snapped, closing my fingers over the gold and snatching my hand away in a swift motion. "First the boat. Then you and your other lads help move that box, wrapped up in the stable, over to the wharf and onto the boat. And be careful, mind you, for it is very heavy and very delicate. You get paid when we leave. If you do damage to what's in the box, the whole deal is off." "As ye say, Dominus," replied Draco with a bow and a sweeping gesture with his hand. "As ye say." I took Abu aside, and with my back to Draco, moving away a few steps, whispered to him, "Tell me if he lays a hand on you. Keep secret the treasure in the water trough. Do not let them see what is inside when it is moved. If you are asked, tell them it is my treasure, but you do not know what it is. Kyrios, this man is a thief and a liar. I would be most happy if you took me away, and I am grateful. I would slit his throat if I could, but you must not trust him. I don't, I said. I left to gather my things and awaited news about the boat. It was midday before Abu came back, knocking at my door. All is ready, he said. When we arrived at the wharf, I saw Draco and 3 of his henchmen standing beside a docked felucca. As he walked up, Draco shuffled forward and, in a surprisingly quick move, seized Abu by the throat. He shoved Abu down, forcing him to his knees before me. Doulos, he sneered. Here's your new Kyrios. And turning to me, he said in that sickly sweet voice, and Kyrios, here's your new Doulos. Good to be rid of him, says I. And he laughed. No doubt he thought I had seriously overpaid him in the bargain. Draco was leaning on his staff, clutching it with both hands, and looking at me suspiciously. Abu, lad, I said, get up and get into the boat. Abu slipped away, up the gangplank, and into the felucca. I turned to Draco, and holding out a small cloth bag with the 4 gold aureas inside, I untied the neck of the bag, and the gold coins fell out, displaying them in the palm of my hand. Shall we seal the deal now? I said, making a great display, as a magician might, that I was pouring the coins back into the bag. I handed it to Draco. Without looking in the bag, Draco snatched it away and stuffed it inside his tattered and dirty tunic. I turned and climbed up the gangplank. As the felucca began to slip away from the shore, its crewmates rowing, I called out, Draco, aren't you going to look in the bag? Draco's hand fumbled around the inside of his tunic, and he pulled the bag out, opened it, and peered inside. It was full of worthless stones, which he poured onto the ground. He raised his fists to me and began a string of loud curses and dark oaths of revenge. I tossed my head back and laughed. Do not worry, my friend. You have not been cheated. Check that thief standing beside you. He has your money. With that, the henchman standing next to Draco looked at him. Slowly, he put his hand into the front of his tunic and appeared surprised at what he found, pulling out the cloth bag with the gold coins in it. Instantly, Draco again surprised me with his speed and strength. Disguised underneath the facade of a skinny, sickly-looking runt of a man, he sprang like a jackal upon the henchman and began clubbing him about his head and shoulders with his staff. The man fell like a rock beneath the blows until he lay unconscious and bleeding on the ground, the gold coins spilling out of the bag onto the ground. Draco's other henchmen dove after them and went on their hands and knees scraping for the coins in the dust. Draco sprang upon them, one after the other, clubbing them vigorously with his staff until all 3 ended up in a jumble on the ground. As I watched, that ultra-dark shadow, which was never far from Draco, floated around and engulfed the foursome, obscuring one from the other, until to me they looked like one swirling blob of darkness. And good luck to you all, I yelled as the boat now pulled out into the current of the great river. I looked at Abu, and he broke out into a giggling laughter. Kyrios, how did you do that? Asked Abu. Nothing a practiced amateur magician like myself couldn't accomplish, my boy, I said. Abu's eyes grew wide. You are a magician? He exclaimed. In another life, in another time, I said. Can you teach me? If you wish, I replied. Music for this chapter: Legends by Ed Records, Somewhere Far Away by Andy Bird, Rise by Twins Music.